Melissa from Meditative Astrology. Today we're going to talk about the astrology of November 23rd through 29th. We have quite a few things that we're going to go ahead and talk about this week. It's Thanksgiving week if you're in the United States, so happy Thanksgiving to all of those that are celebrating. Before we get into everything, quick reminder to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you like astrological content, if you want to find ways to create personal relationships with the astrology and really focusing on how it plays into your own life, then that is the purpose of this channel. We have the weekly videos that come out where we go through all of the astrology, and then on Sundays we have a astrological meditation where we get together, we talk maybe a little bit specifically about the astrology, and then we come into a space where we can meditate, contemplate, and sit in silence with what is going on. Consider what is going on within our lives and create a meaningful conversation. Create dialogue with the gods and the goddesses that are interacting with us through the symbolic image of the sky. Really, that is my whole goal here, is to create personal relationships and personal connections that goes a little bit deeper than just the standard significations of the planets here. So yeah, subscribe if you haven't already. Facebook, Instagram, if you follow there, then you'll see other posts and announcements. There's a weekly intention that goes along with our meditation, and you can find that there as well. So yeah, like, follow, subscribe on all of the things, and let's go ahead and get right into this week. So at the end of last week's video, we ended with talking about Mercury and Saturn coming into a trine. Today, we begin the video by talking about Mercury and Jupiter coming into the trine. So this is that Grand Water Trine space, right? These planets, we've talked a lot about this since the middle of October. All of these planets that have moved across the end degrees of Scorpio, specifically 24, 25 degrees. So Mercury has been through this space, Mars has been through this space, the Sun has been through this space, Venus is going to go through this space yet. Mercury is coming back to this space for the second time. This Grand Water Trine, we have been talking about this for weeks and weeks. If you go back to old videos, you will see a lot of detail and a lot of different ways that we've talked about it. But the amplification of water this fall is huge. When you get a Grand Water Trine, you get an activation of all three water signs, and therefore all three water houses in our birth charts. Water represents our emotions. It represents our connections to others. It represents origins, where we've come from. So our personal origins from our own life, so our own experiences, our ancestors, and maybe even past lives, where all of the things that have brought you to this very moment, all of the little pieces, that's water right there. Our emotions, our memory bodies, our conscious and unconscious memories, right? The subconscious programmings that we all have within us. All of these things are water, but specifically our connections, our relational connections, our origin type connections, our emotional connections. And that can be to people, that can be to things, that can be to feelings and experiences and all of the things. Mercury came into this water trine space just after its conjunction with Mars. So Mars and Mercury were both in the sign of Scorpio. It moved forward into Sagittarius, stationed retrograde, and now it's moving back into the trine with, back into that Grand Water Trine space. So interacting with Saturn and with Jupiter. The Saturn end of it, we talked about this in last week's video, so you can go back to that. But the feeling of culmination, the feeling of things coming to a space where they've served their purpose. We can look at this as death. We can look at this as transformation. We can look at this as an expiration. We can look at it from one chapter to another. And again, it plays out differently for all of us. The Jupiter portion of this Grand Water Trine expands. It brings unity, cohesion, understanding, understanding through philosophies, through insights, through wisdom and knowledge coming into our being. Saturn brings lessons through the idea of impermanence, the idea that nothing lasts forever. So in this Grand Water Trine space, we have this simultaneous, it's like an expansion and a contraction. It's things that are coming to a place of rest and things that are going like this, that are expanding, right? Saturn might kind of go like this a little bit, might constrict, where Jupiter expands and it goes back out like this. I'm having the image of like those, I don't know, there was these little like plastic ball things when I was a kid that like if you held it and you pulled it out, it got really big, and then if you pushed it together, it got really small. And I'm getting kind of like the image of that. That's the space that Mercury is coming back into retrograde. Jupiter is also retrograde now. It was not retrograde. So there is this reworking or this reconsidering within this part of the Grand Water Trine. If Jupiter likes to integrate and the Mercury retrograde is bringing us into a new synodic cycle, a new experience for Mercury, a new path, or the next chapter of the path, I'm looking at a reintegration with these two planets coming together. Jupiter unifies, brings together, and both planets are retrograde. So you're able to change your mind. I'm thinking about the information that came through, maybe the feelings and the emotions. Maybe there was a little raw, maybe there was a little brashness, maybe there was a little bit, scratchiness that came through the first time that Mercury came through the water trine. It moved into the sign of Sagittarius, the place of Jupiter. Maybe it got some sort of insights or knowledge or some sort of understanding, and now it's retrograding to come back into this space. So before it was in this space with Mars co-present in the sign of Scorpio. Now it has Venus co-present in the sign of Scorpio. So I'm wondering if the first pass of Mercury coming through the Grand Water Trine space might have been a little more difficult, might have been a little bit more edgy, or a little bit more like, you know, I really don't like this feeling, or like something that maybe made us feel a little bit uncomfortable in some sort of way. Now we're coming back and revisiting that space, but we picked up something along the way, right? We picked up what we've learned in the sign of Sagittarius for that short little bit of time. Maybe we were shown a level of optimism. Maybe we were shown, you know, a glimpse of the future or something like that, or some little shred of hope to kind of hold on to as we go back into the sign of Scorpio, back into that deep space. So now that we've gained something from Jupiter's sign and we're coming back into the interaction with Jupiter, now we can expand our mental space. Now those understandings and those insights, the knowledge and the wisdom coming into contact with the planet that is the mind, that is our thoughts, communications, perceptions, tools and resources as well. Now we can integrate it or reintegrate it, right? So whatever we've picked up in the last few weeks, how can you bring that forward to maybe some of the difficult stuff that came up in maybe the middle of October or beginning of October, you know, in that type of time frame. Really connecting to the mental realm and expanding on it. Maybe it's exploring our thoughts. Maybe it's exploring our emotions, or, you know, exploring through an expanded view some of these watery things. Our ancestors, our origin, family type things can certainly come up here, but all of those emotional connections really being explored here. At the same time, we have Venus making a sextile to Pluto. If we talk about this water trine space being a simultaneous contraction and expansion, I think we can see that symbolism through the Sun and Pluto as well. We can associate death or impermanence or things expiring or passing away with Pluto, because Pluto transforms. It brings a deep transformation, often through some exploration of something somewhat difficult. And the sun, the sun represents an understanding and an intelligence, a little bit different than Jupiter, but still the sun and Jupiter both have this royal type energy to it, where there's an understanding or a knowing or an intelligence in some sort of way here. So if we're expanding, think about how the sun illuminates, right? Illumination is a word that comes along with the sun quite frequently. We're illuminating something within the depths. We're illuminating something that is needing to kind of fall away or pass away in some sort of way. It brings Pluto with that transformation and the letting go, the ability to let go. It can bring a great courage to bring some sort of transformation. It can feel very empowering or it can feel very intimidating. Another way of thinking about this is the sun represents our soul. Our life path, it represents our purpose. It represents the direction, right? The direction of life. That's the intelligence, that part that it has. So feeling empowered, feeling like you can take the steps on your path, I feel like that relates back towards what the track that I'm thinking on, with Mercury coming back into this trine space with something that it didn't have before. Whatever it has brought forward, this sextile between the sun and Pluto, which the sextiles, they can be a little bit subtle. It can be one of those things where it just feels like things are flowing. Maybe you feel like you have a little extra energy. Your vitality is just really, really flowing. Maybe you feel like you're able to assert yourself. Maybe you're looking kind of deeply at yourself, and that's where that impermanence or that passing away or that death and rebirth or transformation aspect can come into it. Pluto and the sun both have power. They both have strength. It makes me think of endurance. It makes me think of sustainable power. The sun is stable. The sun is the eternal light that doesn't change. It moves at the same speed. It does not retrograde like the planets do. It does not change its phase like the moon does. It's the constant, right? It's the consistent, and it's the center as well. So it's stable. It has the sustainability to it. So if we're looking for like a sustainable power, you have the sun, and then Pluto. Pluto comes from the Greek meaning of wealth or riches. So Pluto is powerful within its own right. Whether it's powerful in a destructive way or an empowering way is what the difference could be. So we really start out this week where I feel like there's an ability to be empowered, to have the courage, and to have the insights and understandings that we did not have when we were in this space before, to be able to see a little bit clearer, see a different way, move a different way, move through whatever it is that has been coming up for us. Really moving through the emotions and not letting them get stuck. So this is really an interesting way for us to go ahead and start out the week here. This Grand Water Trine space, I mentioned that, we ended last week's video talking about it on Saturday because Mercury made the exact trine to Saturn Saturday, November 22nd, and the exact trine to Jupiter Sunday, the 23rd. So really the whole weekend, the end of the week, the beginning of the week, we're in this Grand Water Trine space. So that's where we're at for Sunday. If we go ahead and move forward into Monday, this is where Venus makes the conjunction with Mercury, or maybe rather Mercury conjoins Venus because it's moving a little bit faster. This is one of those nuances of that Grand Water Trine space. Mercury was conjoining Mars at the time that it went through the first time. Now it's conjoining Venus. Now maybe things are a little bit more balanced, a little bit harmonious in some sort of way. So in this water trine space, Mercury meets Venus. It's interesting to note that Venus is in her detriment. It's her opposite side of her domicile, which is the sign of Taurus. Mars, when it was in this space with Mercury, is in its home sign, in the sign of Scorpio. So we have a different energy here, right? Venus maybe has been fumbling through the dark a little bit. It's not natural for her to be in this deep space. It's not natural for her to pick things apart and, look deeply at the dark things. She's Taurus. She's Libra, right? She unifies. She brings cohesion. She levels things rather than separating things like Mars does. So maybe she's been fumbling through the dark. Maybe she's had to adjust, right? Maybe she's had to find a way to step into that keen emotional and intuitive vision that Scorpio has. I'm thinking of like cat eyes in the dark when I think of, or adjusting to the dark, right? Like you kind of have to have cat eyes to be in the sign of Scorpio. We don't necessarily have cat eyes, right? When we step out into the dark, our eyes have to adjust for a minute. That's kind of the process that Venus has potentially been going through. So maybe Mercury coming through here with whatever it's picked up in the sign of Sagittarius, moving through the water trine space, making some good use out of that there. Now there's this messenger that's coming out of the shadows being Scorpio, right? So listen close. There may be an aid for Venus. If it feels like Venus has had a hard time being Venusian, to be cohesive, to bring unity, to bring things together, because if it feels like we keep just having to kind of look down deep to try to find that, we keep searching for it deeper and deeper. Now Mercury may be a messenger that's coming through with some wisdom and some ways to reconfigure, because that's what Mercury is doing. Mercury is reconfiguring, it's readjusting, it's reanalyzing and re-looking at, retracing its steps through the retrograde process. So maybe Mercury is going to bring in a way to be able to communicate desires, to be able to communicate our needs and what we want. And maybe some of the things that we've realized that we want are a little bit deeper than we thought they were before, right? Venus is in Scorpio, so she's looking in those deep nooks and crannies. She's discovering things, right? So now maybe she's able to communicate those things. They may be, a little bit more of the dark feminine conversations. I could see women's rights coming up with this, or emotional needs that haven't been met that we want to be able to voice. Our emotions and our intuitive spaces and those origin spaces, all of those watery spaces are still amplified here because it's right within that space there. I could see circling back to Venusian conversations here because of the retrograde, right? Maybe there's conversations that we had when Mercury was in the sign of Scorpio, and now we're looping back around to those conversations and Venusian conversations. So things related to our desires, things related to love, relationships, enjoyment, but having these deeper, real, raw conversations, right? So as Mercury comes back into the space where it's offering some communication to Venus that has been in a little bit more of a difficult space, are you able to be vulnerable, or are you guarded, right? At its best, Scorpio has this emotional vulnerability and awareness, right? There is a emotional awareness in the sign of Scorpio that it can be deeply observant of. But the scorpion has a shell too, right? And it can sting. So there is often a, like everything's fine demeanor on the outside with the sign of Scorpio, right? Maybe there's a little bit of a straight face or a little bit of a stone face where there's a lot more going on behind the scenes there. So then when you get to those real raw conversations, are you going to allow yourself to have that emotional awareness, or are you locking the things up, right? Very deep Venusian conversations can be coming up here this week, but they may be insightful, being in this water trine space and everything we just talked about with Mercury here too. Deep understandings in very general or very specific ways can come through here. Venus likes to unify, it likes to bring things together, it likes to flow, and Scorpio pulls back those deeper layers. We just had a very potent new moon in this space that we talked a lot about that last week, so you can talk about that, but that was a very powerful and intense new moon opening up this lunar cycle. So Mercury also went through a cazimi at that point. Again, look back to last week's video. But being able to understand and break down these deeper levels of this water trine space and what it has been showing us, the emotions and the accumulations, the things that we've gathered, the things that we've collected that are showing up here for us. The ability to bring them together and find some sort of cohesion here feels very possible this week, where maybe it was a little bit more difficult before. Again, we had Mars here before. It's Mars's sign, but it's still Mars. Now we have Venus here. It's not Venus's sign, it's the opposite. So it's a little bit of a trade-off, but it feels like if Venus has been struggling a little bit, Mercury may be a good help for that. So yeah, we're just continuing with the amped up energy for the beginning of this week here. If we go ahead and move forward into Tuesday here, not a whole lot going on other than following the moon around. It moves from the sign of Capricorn into the sign of Aquarius. And then if we go ahead and move forward into Wednesday here, the moon's in the sign of Aquarius all day. And this is where Venus comes into that Grand Water Trine space. Okay, so Mercury moved through it. Mercury and Venus conjoined, and then Venus moves right through it. Really, all of this is happening pretty much simultaneously. You see how it's all within a week span. You can be feeling all of this all at one time or separated. It might really feel like the water is rushing in. So I've talked about in past weeks about looking at the physical, like the real qualities of water and the different ways that we experience water. Think about when water rushes in, right? It can clean things, it can purify things, it can wash things away, but it can also destroy things. When it destroys things, think about like a flood or a hurricane or something like that. It may destroy things in its path. It may have things fall away. I'm thinking now about Saturn, but it leaves a space to create something new, to rebuild, to have some sort of vision. That could be like Jupiter. So Venus is now coming into this Grand Water Trine space. This really feels like moving into this space for Venus feels like it's trying to tie a bow on the Grand Water Trine. Yes, Mercury is going to make one more exact contact. I've said last week or the week before that I really feel like the rest of Mercury's retrograde is in the space of the water trine because it gets to be like, I don't know, like 4 to 5 degrees away from that whole trine space. I think it stations direct at 20 degrees of Scorpio. So there's a lot of water rushing in, right? There's a lot of water, there's a lot of space that is coming through. Venus coming through this space, even with the difficulties that she's had, I feel like there's a big potential for emotional healing here, right? Looking at the wounds, looking at the traumas, looking at the accumulations that have come up. What have we noticed that is piling up? Are there emotions? Are there relationship things that we've been working through? Have we been discovering family type things? Are there ancestral things? Are there wounds there? Are there traumas there? Are there things that haven't been spoken before that are being spoken now, or things that we're recognizing our feelings about them, or the programmings and the subconscious things and all of those watery things that can show up here for us. Our spiritual connection, our otherworldly connection, our maternal connections, and our, the nurturing. Do we feel like we're nurtured? Are we allowed to nurture ourselves? Do we nurture others? All of those type of things. Venus coming into this space now brings a generosity and brings a maturity. So if we are thinking about generous and we're thinking about healing, we're giving a good amount of energy to that space for some sort of healing, right? Positive energy, Venusian type energy. It's still deep. She's still in the sign of Scorpio. The Saturn, the trine part of it brings a maturity, brings a release, and brings those limitations that with Venus can be beneficial. Maybe we notice places where we were giving too much or we weren't giving enough. Saturn will go ahead and show you those type of things. Saturn and Venus are very committed. Since this is Venus coming through this space and, not some of the other planets that we have, this part of it could feel like it deals more with relationships, maybe. So if there are things that have been brought up in the last month or so, maybe there's now an impact on some sort of relationship. Or maybe we're able to create new relationships or, rekindle old relationships. And we can create relationships with like just about anything, right? So it can be a person that's standing next to you. You could create relationships with your ancestors by creating an ancestral altar, or by getting to know more about your family, or, doing genealogy type work or something like that, or, making a space for some sort of family heirloom type thing, right? You can create relationships with your younger self by looking at conditionings, by looking at patterns, by looking at subconscious type things. So there's lots more relationships than just like human A and human B. So just kind of keep that in mind. With Venus coming into this space, the ability to feel a little grandiose or a little overindulgent is possible. I'm looking at Venus and Jupiter here at this point. I think that's tempered a bit by Saturn, so I wouldn't necessarily think that so much. But when we have a trine, which is of the nature of Jupiter, it's expansive, it's cohesive. We have the two benefics, we have Venus and Jupiter, which both like to bring good things. They can bring almost too much of good things, right? Too much of a good thing is not necessarily a good thing. So that rushing of water could also be that that overindulgence. So maybe we're just really feeling into our emotions, and we have to kind of pull ourselves out of that space before we funnel down too far or something like that. So really, whatever has been brought up for you within the water space, within the water houses, if you don't know where the water houses are in your chart, we can do a reading and we can look at it that way. It's the signs of Cancer, the signs of Scorpio, and the sign of Pisces, so you can look at that in your birth chart. Look at the house topics. Think about what has been going on for you. Think about maybe how Venus could be tying a bow on it all, right? How could Venus be bringing some sort of cohesion or a little bit of healing? You know, maybe she's bringing a little bit of chamomile to a space that has been a little heated and a little over caffeinated, right? Or something kind of like that. You know, maybe there's a little bit of a sunburn, and you know, we have a little bit of aloe that we can put on that now, right? Kind of like that. Something that's going to soothe, something that's going to allow us to feel the blessings and the abundance and the support of growth, because really Saturn and Jupiter together, they support the systems and the structures and the frameworks on many different levels within our lives. So there is growth and there is support that is being provided here, but it might have to stir some things up to be able to find them, right? And then, you know, what happens when you stir water? Think about like if you go to the beach and you start moving the water around, it gets mucky, right? Because like the sand starts to kick up and stuff like that, like if you're in real shallow water by the shore. So you have to kind of like stir up the muck, and then you have to kind of let it clear a little bit, and then you can see, and then you can experience like what's in the water. This might not be a whole lot different from that there. So that's coming through Wednesday. If we go ahead and move forward into Thursday here, no exact aspects this day. The moon moves from the sign of Aquarius into the sign of Pisces. And then if we go ahead and move forward into Friday, the big news that we have going on here is that Saturn is moving into direct motion. So Saturn has been retrograde since the middle of July 14th I have written down. At the same time that Saturn is going direct, the moon is applying to a conjunction with Saturn. It's in the sign of Pisces. So I feel like that is just another little nod at Saturn. And Saturn's been doing a lot of work because, again, Grand Water Trine things, right? So if Saturn can represent limitations and boundaries and frameworks and, you know, the containers for us to put things in, which are all things that we need. We all need structure, right? We all need some sort of limitations. We can't just have no boundaries and be able to just do whatever we want at any period of time, right? There's routines and there's responsibilities and obligations. That's where Saturn comes into play. Saturn can be a little overbearing. It can have us feel like we're pinned down in different ways, for sure. But really what Saturn does is slows us down to stop, to consider, is this actually, like, seriously consider. It's like your dad sitting you down at the table. Is this the choice that you want to make? You can make your own choice, but here's the pros, here's the cons. And then you have to have that serious conversation. So when Saturn is retrograde, we are invited to reflect inward regarding the structures, the foundations, and the frameworks within your lives. So where have you been invited to look at the structures, look at the frameworks, look at the building blocks of your life since July? So through the summer, July, August, September, October, and into November. Where have you been reflecting on these things? Has there been something that maybe has been slowed down and brought maybe not to a stop or block, but maybe it's just not moving quite as fast as you thought it would? You know, where have the realizations been? Have there been sobering moments? Has there been reality checks for you through this summer? Has there been a shift in stability here through the retrograde process? These are the things that I think we can think about as we're nearing the end of Saturn's retrograde and moving back into direct motion. Because when Saturn is retrograde and we look inward, we look at the structures and the frameworks and how we are playing in with them, right? And we're seeing it from an internal perspective. Where has the reality check been? Where have the brakes been put on here? Now, maybe something has reached its expiration. Maybe we kind of noticed that. Now that Saturn is going to move forward and it's going to move direct, it can start putting some of these realizations maybe into place for us. So what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with the realizations, right? That's where Saturn moving direct, and now we can create new foundations, new structures, because we're done reviewing the ones that have already been here. That doesn't mean they all have to go away, but maybe there's something that needs a little bit of tweaking. And since July, you've been sitting down at that dining room table with Dad, and you've been, looking at the budget, and you've been figuring things out, and you've been like weighing the pros and the cons. Now it's time to make your decision. Are you going to follow through with the plan that's there? Do you need to make a plan? Do you even have a plan, right? Kind of like that. The things that have reached their expiration can be Piscean. They can be watery because of that water trine thing again. But the systems and the beliefs and the emotional connections can be coming through kind of strong here. There can be a wishfulness, and I'm thinking about like if things have not been, like maybe if we've realized that things aren't moving quite the way, or there has been a reality check, maybe there's some sort of longing that has come through with that, within that space. Is there something that we've held grip on that needs to be released? I think when Saturn is moving from its retrograde period into the direct period, it's good to find different questions to contemplate on and put them into the perspective of our own life, because Saturn, the retrogrades of the slower planets are so long that it's not like Mercury where it's more of an acute situation, it's more of a chronic situation. I'm a healthcare worker, so now I'm using those analogies. But something that takes a much longer process rather than like small individual events. So maybe we've been holding on to something and we need to release it there too, right? So yeah, Saturn is going back direct, so no more retrograde Saturn. So that's where we're at for Friday. If we go ahead and move forward into Saturday, if I can get my computer right here, we're going to go ahead and move into Saturday, November 29th. Here we have Venus moving into the trine with Neptune. So after making that trine with Saturn and Jupiter, it's going to move right into that trine space with Neptune. This feels like it's a continuation of that tying the bow on. And, if Venus moving through this space has brought some sort of salve or some sort of healing, some sort of resolve, or some sort of unity, she comes into the contact with Neptune shortly after that, and she can dream big. She can allow her boundaries to fade away. She can be intoxicated by her creative, romantic desires, and there is a very deep, devoted expression here when Venus and Neptune come together. When Venus and Neptune come together, we can feel either very, very connected or very disconnected. It's the trine, so I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to feel very connected. But that clarity versus unclear thinking is very possible here. Otherworldly connections. Both Neptune and the sign of Pisces have spiritual significations and connotations to themselves. So feeling connected to something otherworldly. I mentioned that Venus moving through that water trine space was potentially a little bit more relational because it's Venus. Now that it's coming into contact with Neptune, those relations can feel a little bit more, I'm wondering if those relations are of the otherworldly kind. So that makes me think more ancestral. That makes me think more like spirit guide team, angels, the ones that are guiding us from the other side, our spirit guides. If you buy into that school of thought. So this can be very inspiring, and this can be very inspiring just as Venus is getting ready to move in the sign of Sagittarius, which it's going to do on Sunday, November 30th. So Venus has been in the sign of Scorpio talked about maybe it's a little bit difficult for her there, right? Maybe she's been trying to fumble through the dark and she's been trying to have her eyes adjust. She received messages as Mercury came into contact with her. Maybe a tool or a resource to be able to help her. Then she moves forward into the water trine space. You know, maybe she's provided some sort of aid there from what she's gained. I think about somebody who has been through some experiences and been through some struggles and knows what it's like, so therefore they help others that could be struggling as well, moving through that space. Now she's coming into contact with Neptune. Now she's able to expand her mind. She's able to let the boundaries kind of fall away to where she can have this full inspired connection, maybe this otherworldly connection where we're connecting to something a little bit greater than ourselves in some sort of way, or connecting deeply to our higher selves as well. It allows it to open up, it allows it to expand. And then she's going to move into the sign of Sagittarius, the place of Jupiter, right? Where we are looking for experiences, we are looking to move forward here. At the same time, she's making that opposition to Uranus too. So that revolution from the depths to do something a little bit different. Again, Venus has been in the shadows, she's been deep in the deep. Now she's reaching this space where she can dream, where she can grow, she can feel like she can do something a little bit different. Maybe she's going to look at things a little bit differently. So what has Venus discovered in the sign of Scorpio? What have the realizations been for you over the last month or so that Venus has been in the sign of Scorpio? Kind of like sitting with Saturn, sitting with dad at the table there. Where are the impulses to break away from the norm? Are you going to follow through on those? Uranus can bring lots of courage. It can bring lots of bravery. With the trine to Uranus and Neptune, I could see where we could get very grandiose in some of our ideas. You know, maybe we aren't thinking quite clearly and we just kind of like go off the courage route and we do things that maybe we wouldn't necessarily have done otherwise. That can be beneficial. It could also be a little bit too much. So that's individual and depends on each and every one of us. There's a lot going on for Venus here this week, but there's a lot going on in general here. I feel like there's a good space for healing, understanding, messages to come through, and tools and resources that allow us to make some space to clear whatever has come up for us through October and into November. Maybe not clearing, because maybe it's not something that needs to be like let go of or released or like pushed away. Clear feels like it's done, it's over with. But an understanding, a working with, and a unity. Maybe the things that have come up for us, whether they're beneficial or not, usually it's more of a mixed bag for most of us. How can we incorporate that? How can we integrate that into wherever we're going from here, right? Integration and reintegration may be a good word for this week. So that is what we have going on for this week. Again, if you've made it this far through the video, please subscribe if you haven't already. Helps the channel to grow, helps you not miss anything. Please come join us for our weekly meditations, Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's really a special space for you to be able to create whatever it is that you need to for this upcoming week. So yeah, thank you for walking through the week with me. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you that are celebrating, and I will see you at our live meditation. Take care and have a great day.